Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken Wille. I am the President and CEO of KOW Building Consultants. We have a great webinar that I'm very excited to present to you today, entitled Construction Pricing in 2025, Navigating Tariffs, Labor Shortages, and Supply Chain Risks. You notice I put a date on that. It's not just to show today's date, but it's also to say, wait a week or two and I might have to do this again and update you all. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started. We're going to take about an hour. We might be a little early. If we are, then I will answer a few questions. We're not going to stop this during it. I'm going to ask you to all stay on mute, and we're just going to move our way through. And at the end, if we have question time, we will take them via the chat. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started. First, a little bit about KOW. Founded in 1978, we provide building, construction, environmental, and sustainability services. Headquartered in New York, that's where we were born and raised, and now we're out through much of the country in most major metropolitan areas. If there's anything we can do, please reach out. If there's anything you'd like to know afterwards, certainly you can go to our website. You'll have my contact information at the end, and give any one of our team members a call. We'd be happy to help. We have over 50 employees performing plan reviews, construction loan monitoring, property condition reports, phase one environmental site assessments, and a full suite of sustainability services. So here's today's agenda. First of all, what happened? Particularly, we're going to talk about tariffs, but I'd like to update you all on some other things as well. Where were we? Where are we? And what's next? And I'm going to give you my best guess as to what's next. I know what I am and I know what I'm not. I'm not a marketing expert. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a finance or bank expert. I am a civil engineer. I am a construction expert. And as far as my career of 30 so years, I'm going to try to put some things together that we're hearing and seeing in the field and on the construction site and at the OAC meeting, and bring it to you to hopefully make us a little better prepared for today's environment. So let's talk about a few things that have been talked about the last few years, and then we're going to spend a lot of time today, including a case study I hope you find interesting on the tariffs. First, an update on labor shortages. Now, that was an issue. We heard a lot about that the last few years and in 2024. Is it still an issue? It is. It is still an issue in the construction industry. Partially, this is because we have an aging population. The boomers such are retiring, they're moving on, and we do have a labor shortage in the construction industry. We do have a lack of skilled workforce entering the trades. If you ever hear me in this webinar talk about the skilled trades, I mean, when I say skilled trades, licensed trades in particular. And the licensed trade would be any construction work that you need a license to do, like plumbing, fire sprinkler, elevator, electrical, mechanical, etc. What's the non-licensed trades, and I don't mean any disrespect, of course, to those workers, would be your demolition, roofing, carpentry, painting, etc. So there's a little bit of a difference between those two as far as what you need to do to enter that workforce. Labor shortages are going to continue to impact costs and schedules. I can say that we've started to see, although COVID certainly turned everything on its ear, over the last decade or so, when things are busy, it's harder getting workers, it impacts costs, and it impacts schedules. And really those two go together, don't they? Whenever we're talking about schedules, we're also talking about costs. Let's talk about a typical construction project we might have. If you expect it to go 14 months and it goes 18, that's 4 more months that you're going to pay for general conditions. Sidewalk shed, temporary electric, supervision, security, overhead, all the pieces that run the job, those are going to cost you. It's one of the things we tell in-house to our inspectors all the time. If you're on a job site and someone says, hey, we're going to have a delay on this project, the next question should be, are there going to be change orders for those delay costs? Because they're a very real world thing. I don't know whose reason or blame for the delay, but it is a real world cost. And another thing that we're starting to see, and we're going to keep a close eye on this. I say starting to see, I haven't really seen mass evidence of this, but I've started to see it, meaning I'm hearing about this out in the industry, that if there is a deportation of workers, you're going to see an impact. on site, your construction workers, in your warehouses doing manufacturing, and then your service industries. Could be, plumbing services, roofing services, etc. So that could have a real impact on the available labor or workforce. A couple comments about interest rates. So interest and short-term rates to decline gradually over the next few years. That seems to be where it's going. Again, I'm certainly not an expert on this. I just do some research, put together with smarter people than I have said, and this seems to be the generally accepted idea of where they think it's going. This should stimulate construction activity, and making borrowing more affordable is good for everyone. I'd also say that a lot of the trades we're looking at, a lot of the forecasts we're looking at, and we try to really keep our ear to the ground. Tariffs aside, they're very optimistic. They're cautiously optimistic, perhaps, but they're optimistic. Let's talk a little about supply chain issues. Okay, are they still out there? Some will persist in 2025, but we're largely back to pre-COVID times. So if you think about your supply chain, that you've got your raw materials, and your raw materials could be metals, it could be stone, it could be sand, whatever it might be. Then you have a manufacturing effort, and it could be produced plastic, CMU, steel girders, W members, S members, etc. And then you have your fabrication or your building of your fans, your pumps, your boilers, etc. All these things in that supply chain, when COVID hit, the machine was turned off. And that was an abrupt turn off of the machine, which made it even harder to turn that machine back on. Those days are gone. That is a non-issue anymore. The world supply chain is back up and running. We're still seeing some delays, particularly when things spike for things like big electrical switchgear, appliances, and then anytime you have custom material, custom mechanical, custom facade, etc. But basically, we're back to a pre-COVID, fairly normal environment, tariffs aside. We always do keep an eye on political, not just tariffs, but other trade items, and war or regional impacts to things like the supply chain. So it's something we keep an eye on, but generally speaking, tariffs aside, I know I'm going to get into that in a moment, we're largely back to what I'd call normal times. Couple comments on inflation. How is that impacting the job site and penciling out your construction sites? First of all, it's expected to continue to ease from the last few years. That's good news. We had a few years ago where it really spiked. We're really getting back to where we want to be. It happened before the election. It's happening after the election, and that's good news. The PCE, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, projected to fall to 2.5%. That's a good indicator as well. Well, how does that impact construction costs? So construction costs overall are expected to increase between 5 and 7% for 2025. I'm not talking tariffs yet. I'm going to get to that in a moment. This is just our normal inflation, our normal market trends and market forces. Another study I just saw today actually was Ryder Levitt Bucknell. Average construction material inflation last quarter was 1.11%, which was 1.12% over the last several quarters. Year over year, 4.69. 5 years ago, 5.19. So that's all going in the right direction, and that's what we like to see. Now let's talk a little bit about why you're all here. Tariffs. Okay, so let's bring us up to speed on what we're talking about. Now, I could drill down on any one of these, and every one of these could be an hour themselves. We only have time to go through a summary of it. So let's see where we were, where we are, and how we think it's going to impact things. As of February 1st, Mexico, Canada, and China were on the center stage. Mexico, 25% increase to tariffs on all goods. Canada, 25% with 10% on energy exports. And China, 10% on all imports. I'm taking you back to February 1st. And I'm not going to take you on the changes that seem to happen every day or two with the Trump administration on the tariffs on or off. But let's just start with this slide. Mexico 25, Canada 25, China 10. As of March 4th, Mexico 25 started, Canada 25, 10% energy started, and China an additional 10% to 20% on all imports. That was March 4th. March 12th, steel, 25%, all countries. Aluminum, 25%, all countries. And then reciprocal tariffs for other countries that impose in the US. So there's a company out there that wanted to say 40% on lumber from the US. We're going to say 40% on lumber from your country. So that I can't really define, but that is out there as a measure that's matched from other countries. Where are we today? Okay, the bottom line is Mexico, 25%, except some goods that are exempt in the USMCA agreement, yielding about 50% of goods. Canada, 25%. Again, for what's exempt, it yields about 38% of goods overall are impacted. China's 20%, steel 25, no exemptions. Aluminum 25, no exemptions. And then again, those reciprocal tariffs. So that's where we sit today. So let's take a look at specific trades and what we need to consider. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you down the path of the CSI trades, the Construction Specifications Institute trades. And anyone who's in the industry, anyone who does what we do, or they're on the contracting or CM side, they generally use the CSI layout. And it's just a way that we've all accepted. That's kind of a good way to lay project costs and organization out. So your categories are concrete, masonry, steel and metals, doors and windows, etc. So that's how I'm going to walk you through each one of those trade groups in the CSI breakdown and tell you what we're dealing with. First of all, last year, 2024, just to give you some context to start, about 7% of all materials into the United States were imported. So that's your starting point. 7% all materials imported in 2024. Let's drill down a little. First category, existing conditions, site work. So that is a category on your budgets, that's on your pro formas, that's on your AIA G702 and G703, which I'm going to do a case study in a few moments. So on existing conditions, about 5% is imported. Why? Well, mostly it's local materials like sand, water, stone, etc. And it's also mostly labor, excavation, erosion control fencing, etc. Rough raw materials, mostly local with labor, so a very small impact to existing conditions from these tariffs. How about concrete? Well, again, local water, sand, stone, and your plant is usually local, Rebar is imported generally because that's a steel material. So it's about 20% of material on concrete is imported. That's about where we are right now as a country. Now, will that go down with the tariffs because I can now get my concrete from someone in Georgia and not Canada? That would be nice. That's the hope. We'll get to that a little bit later, but just to give your head a little context, concrete has about 20% of material imported. Masonry, similar, about 15%, mostly local plant and labor. Welded wire mesh is imported, but that's a smaller, about 15%, not a lot. Metals, okay, now we're getting a little more. About 30% of the construction costs in the country right now in that category are imported. This covers a variety of specifications. This is structural steel, this is aluminum, extruded stainless steel. A lot of different things fall into metals. 30% is quite big, but it's not 90%. It's not 80%. Woods, plastics, composites. You could generally consider this woods. I know that it's got 3 names to the topic, but that's really where a lot of that falls. Now, you know what's interesting is you see that it's 25% imported, but this is noteworthy. 70% of sawmill and wood products come from Canada. That's within that 25%, by the way. It's like a sub number of that. That's big. That's a big number. I'm going to show you a map in a moment, but that's a big number that comes from Canada. Thermal and moisture protection, insulation, waterproofing, roofing materials, largely domestic, only about 10% imported. It's a low number. Openings, doors and windows, 25% imported. Okay, that's something. That's not nothing. Doors and windows largely domestic, manufactured, but raw materials and the metals, aluminums, etc., come from import. So your 25% import is a number that is not, that's a substantial number. By the way, this just gives you an idea of where we get a lot of our wood from in Canada. Green is forest. And if you notice, they've got more than we do. Although we're a pretty, we got a lot of trees in this country, compared to the world, there's more in Canada. And the other thing that Canada has as an advantage over the United States, as much as we produce a lot of wood, and we do, we get a ton from them. And the reason is their wood can be broken into two categories, hardwood and softwood. So your softwood is stuff that you don't really care about your structural integrity as much. It's your trim, your base molding, your styles that go in your windows. It's just some of your floorings. It's softwoods. Your hardwood is your structural wood. That's your joist and your hardier wood. And the thing that Canada has over the United States is the slower you grow a tree, the stronger it is. So all else equal, their trees are colder or in a colder region and grow slower, therefore they're stronger. So we have very good lumber here. We have some of the best lumber in the world. Canada's is a little better, and that's why. So when you look at where it comes from in Canada, it's not that we have a wood producing problem in this country. It's not that at all. It's just they have a lot more material, and therefore it's one of the biggest imports we have across the border. Finishes, 20%. Paints, coatings. Specialties, that's custom fixtures, architectural elements, about 15%. Equipment, this is a big one. This includes furnishings, but this is appliances. 50% of equipment as a category is imported. And part of that is that 54% of household appliances come from China. That's a big number. And when things get busy, sometimes there's a slowdown in getting refrigerators and ranges. A lot of it comes from China, and they just can't keep up. The other thing about this number is, of course, it's impacting multifamily as well as single family. It doesn't care if your construction is wood, concrete, steel. If you got kitchens and you need appliances, at 54% is a lot of equipment and materials that we get from China. Conveying equipment, elevators, escalators, 40% imported. Heavy steel, that is a big number because a lot of the metals and steels come from other countries. Fire suppression, plumbing, HVAC, 25% imported. Many are domestically produced, but raw materials varies. A lot of them come from China, Mexico, Canada. We get a lot from other countries. So it grosses to about 25% as an import cost. Electrical, 35%. Advanced systems are even more important. A lot of that comes from the East, from China generally. So what does that mean? That means if we look at the different trades, some are impacted greatly, equipment, elevator, electric. Some are moderately impacted, finishes, concrete, and some are not very impacted at all, thermal and moisture protection, site work. So the problem is that you are all thinking right now, well, I know the tariff numbers, I know the countries, now I know what trades they impact. What does that mean? Well, I want to tie it all together for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up for you. We're going to look at 3 building types and build an estimate for potential price increases. I'm going to show you a wood frame building, a poured in place concrete building, and a structural steel building. Now, wood frame could be a lot of different things. It could be single family home. It could be row style, townhouse. But basically just think of this. Think of a wood structure, wood walls, wood flooring, wood subflooring. So that's going to have a very heavy impact, of course, from those wood materials. Now, once you get past that, it's going to be okay with things like sheetrock and painting and tile and flooring, and that's going to be the same in any kind of project. But our first project type is wood frame. We're then going to talk about poured in place concrete. And again, this is just one example picture. Just want to give you some context to know what we're talking about. And then structural or skeletal steel. We call this skeletal steel because it looks like a skeleton, bones, and the structural integrity of this structure is the steel columns that go up and down, the girders that go left, right, or the other way, and then everything that rests on there. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about structural steel. There's many different versions that fall in this category, but for this context and webinar, just think of this when I say steel building. So first things first, this should look familiar, and this is why I just built up from here. We have our categories, existing conditions. That should sound familiar. Concrete, masonry, metals, etc. They're your categories. Now you notice I have all the categories listed. I have a trade total, and then I have our normal markups. General conditions, 6%, profit 5%, overhead 5%, and then a grand total. So your general conditions, profit, and overhead are add-ons to your trade cost. Now, some of you might be sitting there saying, whoa, I never do a job for less than 10% profit, or overhead 6%, or general conditions is 8%. That's fine. There's lots of different ways to build a budget, and this is not at all the one way. There's many different ways to look at budgeting. I'm just trying to build for you an example or an average of what we're seeing to see the real impact. So for the sake of this illustration, I use these numbers, but you certainly could have different ideas, and you'd be right on different applications requiring 6%, 8%, 2%, 10%. I have no argument with that. But let's move ahead with how we're doing it, and it's this assumption. So for wood frame buildings, I have researched, and I know by our buildings and the trades that the percentage of each for the trades on a wood frame building add to 100% for the trades. And when they add to 100%, they're distributed as you see here. So 20% is in woods, plastics, and composites. That makes sense to me. 3% is in conveying equipment. 15% is fire suppression, plumbing, HVAC, etc. So what I've done is first step, out of 100%, these are the portions that each trade contributes for this building type. If I want to net to $100 grand total, then I need to get $86.21 trade total. And if I know percentages, I can assign a dollar value to each one of those trades. So yes, we've created a project budget of $100. That's your hard cost. I like easy numbers. I'm a civil engineer by training. Math doesn't scare me, but boy, do I love very easy numbers. So your project total hard cost is $100. I don't care about contingency right now, $100 all in. Okay, so how does each one of those trades break down into labor and materials? Well, it varies. So I've created for you, based on this type of building, wood frame, what your labor and materials are on average, as per the research I've done and our projects. Again, you might budget your projects differently and you have different ways of, that's fine. These are good average numbers as an estimate, and that's all we're building here. So as an example, thermal and moisture protection, 50% labor, 50% material. Whereas masonry is 65% labor, 35% material. Makes sense. CMU is pretty cheap considering the labor is very expensive. So I've broken your labor materials by trade. And then I did some research to determine for each one of those trades, for wood frame building, how much is imported. So I know how much is imported by trade. Again, we're building an example here. I then can compute what the tariff increase would be by trade. And if I can, then I can compute my adjusted number from my percent of my original cost, and I come up with the revised cost of $106.62. That means that if you said to me, I have a wood frame building, I'd say to you, all else equal, if there's no tariff changes and all these averages hold, you're going to pay 7% more. I repeated this exercise for poured in place concrete, it's 8%. And I repeated this exercise for steel, and it's 12%. So here's your end result. The cost increase by our estimate of 3 different building types, based on all of our assumptions, are 7% wood frame, 8% concrete, and 12% steel. So if that's what we can expect, the next question is, we talked a little where we came from. We talked about where we are with the tariffs. So what should we look for? Here's my predictions and things to look for. First of all, a couple of things that came up as I was researching, which I think are noteworthy for the audience. Chicago-based Origin Investments, multifamily real estate fund manager, estimates spikes of up to 7.5% for all construction materials, 3.5% overall increase for materials and labor. Lumber may increase 40%. Again, this is their estimate. Electrical switchgear could increase 27%. I didn't go to the level of just one component of electrical. They did. I'm sharing it with you. And concrete, 18% they estimate. So again, you're seeing some of the worst case scenarios. My 7%, 8%, 12% blends everything in. But here is where you're going to see your biggest pain points. And I do not disagree with them. I'm sure they're very smart, well-researched people. None of these numbers surprise me. But there is something good to look for here. And I think this is what the Trump administration is waiting for and looking at. The U.S. steel industry is at 76% capacity today. That's a good thing. That means if I'm buying out a project and I'm going to get the steel out of country, and now I turn to the U.S. steel industry, they've got capacity. They're interested in talking to me, and they can provide pricing that perhaps is going to be my new best friend to get my steel in the States, because they're not at 100% capacity. They're only at 76% capacity. That's a really good thing. If that could be taken up by some people looking elsewhere from outside the country, inside the country, you could see the U.S. steel industry really rise in that capacity number up to perhaps near 100. Now, on a corollary, the U.S. steel industry is at 76% capacity. The U.S. softwood lumber industry has slowed since 2022. And a lot of that work's gone up to Canada, and there's been a lot of closures. Can we open those warehouses back up? That's easier said than done. But maybe that's something that people are looking at now. And again, that might be something we start to see. I will tell you this. We've been asking on our job sites for weeks. And if you really want to know what's going on out there in the construction industry, you got to go to the construction site. You got to talk to the super, the estimator, the person running the OIC meeting, the people that are living, breathing, and battling through construction projects every day. They know what's going on. We've asked them a lot over the last few weeks. My general news to you is good news. Not a lot of activity yet. Okay, now I say yet. Why am I hesitant? I'll tell you why. Last week, I was at the New York Build Show, and it took about 3 hours, and it's at the Jacob Javits Center. It is enormous. And for a 3-hour period, maybe a little less, maybe 2.5, I walked around to about 35 tables of all different companies: roofing, boiler, exterminating, fire extinguishers, carpeting, floor, you name it. Reps, suppliers, material manufacturers. And I said, introduced myself, little small talk, and I said, have you seen any impact from tariffs yet? And I would say unscientifically, about half of them said no, and about half of them said yes. Yes, oh yeah, we have one supplier who yesterday sent us an email, 25% more material, 15% more material, whatever it was, about half and half. Storefront, a few different storefront and metals suppliers, they're up. Expect to see increases in those costs. HVAC equipment. I mentioned fire extinguisher. I was talking to 2 guys from a fire extinguishing company, and he said, look, he goes, the canisters of metal, the chemicals in the canisters come from Canada. Everything's up 25% as of this week. You know, there's no way around it. And I said, how hard would it be for you to shift and get them completely from someone else? He goes, that's months and months and months away. I have work to do next week. I said, fair enough. What else to look for? Costs to increase based on fear. This is already happening. It's not panic, but it's fear. And I think you're going to see more of this over the next number of weeks. Now, one of the things that the president has shown is you never really know what he's going to do next. Is it possible that they have a sit down, Mexico's there, China's there, Canada's there, we're there, and all these get washed down to zero? It's absolutely possible. Yes. The one thing I can guarantee you today is that I have no idea what's going to happen. But I can only estimate based on what is happening. And that's the tariffs are alive and active today. The fear is enough to adjust the price, and it's starting to happen. I think you're going to see an increase in deposit funding. Subs and general contractors are going to say, I need to have more money up front as a deposit. Why? Because I need to lock in pricing. This is something that showed itself during COVID, which I'm seeing similarities to COVID with the tariffs, but I think COVID was a lot worse in comparison. COVID was unplanned, immediate. It impacted everyone. It shut down the supply chain machine of the world, and it was a health scare. It was borders were closed, work was affected, schools affected. I mean, it was so all encompassing that the president and the government, I mean, out of nowhere, had just like a multitude of emergencies to deal with. I don't see that as much here, but I do know that during COVID, you heard a lot of people say, we need to give some money because we need to lock in pricing. If we don't give a deposit, we're not going to lock in pricing. And most of our clients were open to that conversation because they're smart and they understand the risk of not locking in the pricing. And then all of a sudden, it's up 10%, it's up 20%, it's up 30%. So that is a very real thing. I think you're going to see more and more of that. I do think you're going to see an increase in stored material funding, on-site store material and off-site store material. And I also think within that, you're going to see off-site store material, raw material, and off-site store material, manufactured material. So your raw material would be, we've got sheets of metal, we've got aluminum, we've got steel, whatever it might be. Your manufactured store material off-site would be, we got heat pumps, we've got condensers, we've got air handling units, we've got makeup air units. So you're going to see both of those, I believe, increase in the request for those fundings. I would absolutely caution you, you're going to see short-term contract length for execution, meaning the sub's going to give a bid and say, you have to sign this within a week, not 90 days, not 30 days, not 45 days, 7 days. And then when it's going to be honored, when you signed it, great, good for you, but you need to give me a deposit or the first deposit in order for me to honor that pricing. You're going to see more of the risk be reduced on the terms of the receiver of that work, and that's the sub or the supplier. I believe you're going to see price escalation kickers in contracts. This is similar to a few years ago, and this happens every once in a while, but you may recall, some of you, a few years ago, gasoline prices went up a lot in a short amount of time. And what you saw happen, now unfortunately with gasoline prices, is that impacts everything. Every material, every delivery, every worker. So that's very all-encompassing, right? What happened is we started to see bids from contractors, or really from subs, where they would honor the price as long as the national gasoline price didn't go above X. And if it did, they were able to charge you more. The kicker. If the price went up above a certain amount, that kicked in. I think you might see that here as well. This is also something, if you're looking to price a project and you're looking at a very, very small project up to a very, very large project, how you price it is based on a number of things. It's a comparable, it's a subs price, it's who just did your recent job and how is this one different. But on the largest scale, you can look at things like copper futures and what those are trading at. So do I think you're going to see a kicker where it says, if the pricing of metals from this country goes up? I don't know what it'll be worded like. I don't. But I do know it gives an insurance level to the supplier of that bid. So keep an eye on it. I think you might see that. You might also see a movement away from stipulated sum. What is stipulated sum? Stipulated sum is a contract type which is similar but different than a guaranteed maximum price. I'll give you a quick summary of what these two are. Again, this is very, very fast, so excuse me, I'm not getting into a lot of detail. Stipulated sum is a contract that has a set amount, no more, no less, closed book. And I'm not talking about change orders. That's from contingency. A change order, by its very definition, should be outside of the original scope of work. So a change order, by its very definition, and I know that a lot of real world people right now are saying, wait a minute, I have a project. I know, I hear you. A change order should be the following. Your contractor says, I started digging, I hit a tank. I didn't know there was a tank. No one told me there was a tank. There was no records of the tank. I have to properly remove this tank. $100,000 more than I thought it would be. That's a change order. He or she deserves every penny of that. As long as that 100,000 is the right amount, they didn't plan on that. That's a change order. So those aside, a stipulated sum, that contractor would say, I'm going to build this building for you. It's going to cost $50 million. No more, no less. Trust me, I'll do it for $50 million. Now, if I screw up a little and it costs me $51 million, still costs you $50 million. You love having that ceiling. But if I do a really good job and it only costs me $42 million, it still costs you $50 million. So the risk is that I have to bring it in at $50 million as the builder. But the benefit is I get all the spoils if I bring it in under $50 million. Because of it, it's usually a closed book. So if we're working on projects that are closed books because they're stipulated sum, the sum stipulated or set, you have a problem getting the details of the budgeting. A guaranteed maximum price, similar but different to a stip sum. It's no more, maybe less. The spoils or the savings are split and it's open book. So in the same scenario, if I'm the builder and a stip sum, I'm going to build it for 50 million, no more, no less, closed book. A GMP, I'm going to build it for 50 million, no more. Oh, by the way, if I bring it in less, I'm going to split with the owner the profit. I'm going to split that savings. Maybe I get 65%, they get 35%. In that case, it's an open book. All the paperwork, all the subs, everything is shown. Stipulated sum is a little more risky for most of the projects that it's used on because the contractor has to come in at a number that they know they can do, and there's usually not a lot of wiggle room on most projects. I'd say all but most. You might see a movement away from this. Do I think you'll see more cost plus? That's a little different. What's a cost plus? Say, take the same scenario. I say, listen, I don't know what this is going to cost. I'm not going to tell you 50 million stip sum. I'm not going to tell you 50 million GMP. I think it'll come in at 50 million. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to charge you whatever I'm charged, and then I'm going to add on 15% markup or whatever the markup is. I don't think you'll see a movement completely into that, particularly for more known housing, affordable housing, or more known products. But you might. You might because the risk goes down to zero for the person building it. If the mason says they're going to charge 20% more, it gets passed along, no risk to the contractor. Force majeure. So this is outside, or force is bigger than you. This is outside your control. So during COVID, you had certain contractors come back and say, look, I bid this thing in November at 50 million. I can't get any more work. It's going to cost me 70. It was outside of their control. Another example, a few years ago, I remember there was a fire at a insulation plant in Georgia, and overnight, insulation went up 15%. Force majeure, outside your control. So are you going to see contractors come back on that? I don't know, but maybe. What goes up may not come down. This is just human nature, isn't it? You know, once those costs go up, it's tough to get those down. Perfect example is during the last gasoline spike. You saw a lot of pricing go up. I don't remember seeing it come down though. So that's something that I don't want to say that a contractor and a sub is happy about the tariffs for this reason. I think that most subs, most contractors are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to build a job, make a profit, and go home tonight. I don't think they're loving this, but I do think that a benefit to them, if I can call it that, might be once the bar gets raised for everyone on certain materials and trades, you might not see it come down. What about a change in construction type? Can I remove metals? Can I go more to wood? Can I go to cheaper? That's tough. You might be able to do that for a piece of equipment, or say, hey, I was going to get that equipment from Canada or China or wherever. Now I'm going to get it from Florida or Georgia or North Dakota. That you might be able to do. But changing the construction type of a building, that's a months or years long change, not weeks. So that's a lot tougher than it sounds. You might have additional contingency. I'm not sold on this. It may be something you see, it may be something mentioned. And if it is, I guess it's a good way to split the risk. And if it could be shown via change order that there were costs outside their control and outside the window of when they close their bidding period, maybe it's a good way to get the bridge across. So that takes me to the end of the seminar or the webinar. I do have time for just a few questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look here on the chat and have a few questions to answer. I do hope it was helpful today. We started and we talked a little bit about where we are, inflation, we talked about supply chain, we talked about interest rates. I then moved into tariffs, and I hope by using the CSI trades, I built up 3 different building types to tell you where this is probably going. So one of these questions, if a project is 90% bought out, should we still be concerned? Very good question. You're probably okay. The more bought out you get, and if I had to say in general terms, if you're doing a ground up construction project and you're shovel ready, you should have 65%, 70% of your project bought out. Again, I'm just making assumptions. Why do I say that? Well, if you're shovel ready, you should have demolition, excavation, footings, foundation, superstructure, skin, temporary roofing, windows, and underground plumbing. Those should be bought out. If you've got your shovel-ready project, those are coming soon. If that's the case, you've taken a lot of risk off the table. So if you're up to 90% bought out, what is that remaining 10%? Well, unfortunately, some of it might be fixtures, finishes, and appliances, some of it. So you might feel a sting from that remaining 10%, light fixtures from China, etc. It may be tile, which could be more local and is more labor intensive. So the good news is if you only have 10% left to buy out, it's a small number, but it may be mostly imported products. So that might be something to think about. At what buyout percentage would you feel more comfortable with a project? Well, I think the 65%, 70%, that's a good number. I will say that if you ask me, what's a number that most of our clients are comfortable with at closing, depends on the market. The better the market's doing, the less demands they make on the buyout. It's like a loan to value ratio. The loan to value ratio goes up, there's more lending going on, things tighten, LTV comes down. So I think that number, that ground up number 65, 70% is pretty reasonable. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. Do you think any project teams will try to switch from steel to wood or poured in place? I don't. I think that's a tough change. I think that you're talking about something that's months or years long and not days or weeks long. So that's a lot harder to do. I think that it would be ideal. And if you're in the real early planning stage, maybe, but I'm not convinced of that. Do you anticipate contractors trying to use force majeure clause out of their control? Yeah, good question. We covered that a little. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if it'll be as much as COVID, but I do think that you might hear it be some language. And I have to say, the lending community is they're open to it. They understand how risk works, and it doesn't do anyone good to not help the project move along. I'll explain to our new employees all the time, construction loans are risky. If you borrow money to buy a boat, a house, a jet ski, or a car, and you don't pay your bills, someone's going to come knocking. In what world do you show a hole in the ground and say, loan me $100 million? They're risky loans. So they'll understand that might be part of how we bridge this gap. All right. So I think I'm going to go ahead and close it now. We're at about 45 minutes. Again, I really want to thank everyone for attending. I really appreciate your patience in watching this. I hope it was helpful. Let us know at kowbc.com if there's anything we can do. My information's up on the screen there. Have a great day. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you out on construction site.